I'll do my best to cover them off. So essentially what we're going to go through is what anxiety looks like in kids. Spoiler, it looks very similar to adults. What are some of the triggers that kick off anxiety or excessive worry in kids? Some techniques around what we can do to help our kids feel safer, more grounded, more in control of their surroundings. How we can, what we can do specifically to help kids through the wobbly nature of the world that we find at the moment. So particularly with COVID and any other major global impacts at the moment, of which unfortunately there are quite a few. And then we'll jump into those Q&As at the end. So a little bit about me is I started off my world in my adult world, let's say, in psychology and business. So I use that as a platform for understanding why people do what they do, what motivates them to get up and out of bed. And I utilize that predominantly in the corporate world. So using that platform, I went into all of the people-based things in corporate, essentially. So everything from recruitment to training and development, human resources, executive coaching, all of that sort of flavor. And then I also, somewhere along the way, my hippy dippy soul, it bubbled up to the surface and it tapped me on the shoulder and it said, oh, I think you'd quite like to be a yoga teacher. So I went and trained under monks in the south of India to become a yoga teacher over there and brought that back to Australia and taught here as well. And along the way as well, I also worked as what is referred to as a clinician. So that's essentially working one-on-one with adults and kids, but for me it was predominantly kids with learning difficulties in some way. So everything from dyslexia all the way through to autism is what I worked with. And in working with those young kids whose brains worked slightly differently to others, a lot of them had worried little minds at the same time. So having worked with those kids over in the UK doing that informed a lot of the book that we'll talk about as well. Eventually I came back into the corporate world, executive coaching, all of that sort of thing. And then my own anxiety continued to bubble up because I was that anxious achiever, essentially, you know, just constantly striving, saying yes to everything, lists galore, highlighters everywhere. You know, there were so many things that fascinated me and that, you know, switched my light on, that I wanted to do it all and I wanted to do it perfectly. And as Abby mentioned before, last year I ran the Drops bio through a topic called the secret struggle of high functioning anxiety, which is essentially where you have those anxiety symptoms, the excessive worry, the constantly feeling on edge, a bit tired but wired, but outwardly you look like you've just got everything together. So that eventually bubbled up and burnt out, and realized that that is just not the way that was going to work for me anymore. So I smushed everything together and started a life coaching practice here in Sydney, and I still run that now. It's called Vision Scope Coaching, and in that I specialize in working with predominantly women who are those strivers who want to make a big change in their world in some way. So as I mentioned, the anxiety just kept sort of raising its head up and wanting to be known. So one day I had a particularly terrible panic attack and realized that I wished that another version of myself was standing next to me to say, oh, here's what you need to do. And so that's where that adults book came along. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of demand to have a kids version as well. And so if I jump back a little bit, when I was a kid, again, outwardly, I looked very confident. You know, I made friends pretty easily, shy in a couple of circumstances, didn't really like public speaking, you know, doing speeches at school. But aside from that, outwardly, I was pretty confident, happy looking kid. But internally, I worried all the time. I, you know, was always procrastinating and leaving assignments to the last minute. I was a perfectionist around handing things in. I really got stuck on what people had said the day before or what I might have said the week before at school. And so from a personal perspective, I get the lived experience of what it's like to be a bit of a worried kid. And so it's using the lived experience and having worked with kids and coming from a background of psychology that I want to chat through everything else as we go through now. So if there's any questions, pop those in the chat box again and we'll see how we go. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to bring up on the screen a PowerPoint so you can see that at the same time, and we'll switch back and forth so you're not looking at a screen the whole time. So bear with me. Here we go. Okay. All right. Lovely. Okay. Oh, there's the book. Everybody enjoy. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look at what anxiety looks like in kids. As I mentioned, a lot of the symptoms in kids and adults are actually very similar. The major difference that we see between adults and kids with anxiety is that adults have the emotional vocabulary to describe their experience. So most adults, not all adults, but most adults can identify if they're feeling worried. You know, they can identify if they're feeling sad or disappointed or they're grieving. Whereas a lot of kids, it just feels a bit like a whole body experience where they just feel bad in some way. However, if we can drill it down and ask the right questions, the experience is very similar between adults and kids. So these are the three different areas that we can look at the symptoms or the indicators of anxiety in kids, remembering that a lot of these are the same in adults. So if you see these and go, oh, that feels quite familiar for my own experience, that's something you might want to have a look into as well. So physical manifestation of anxiety can look like these things. So that kids might complain of having a headache. They might have a stomach ache. You know, having their tummy ache before school is a really common one that I'm sure a lot of you are particularly familiar with. Tight muscles is another one. So I know that as an adult, when I'm feeling stressed, you know, my shoulders get really tight. Same for kids, but it might be all over. You know, they might get cramped calves. They might be holding their fists quite tight, and so this forearm gets tight. All of the muscles can feel the effects of this constant tension sitting in their body. Another one is trembling, which is a bit confronting to see when kids are trembling, but you'll know exactly what it is when you see that. Sweating is another one. And I should say it actually a change in appetite. So I'm going to jump away from the psychology component of anxiety for a moment. And if we look at anxiety from an energetic perspective, where we process our emotions energetically is in our stomach. So in that area around our navel and our belly button. And so when our emotions go a little bit skew, if it's the same physical area, that starts to feel the effects. So some kids and some adults, if they're feeling anxious and worried in some way, their appetite will completely go. You know, they don't want to eat anything. If anybody's ever been through a breakup, you probably have experienced that in some way. Or it can swing the other way as well. We just kind of want to eat everything, and you want to fill up that discomfort that's sitting right in the belly. So any of these indicators, there are more indicators, but we're just going to have a look at sort of some of the major ones. Remembering that anxiety overall is where we are excessively worrying. It's worrying more than the average person, and it's when that worry sticks around. It's really normal. With everything in mental health, it's a continuum and it's a spectrum. And so it's a normal response to worry about some things. But if that worry lurks and it stays around and it starts to impact day-to-day functioning, that's when it's creeping into anxiety area as opposed to worry. Okay, so let's have a look at the behavioral indicators or symptoms of anxiety. Perfectionism. Oh, hello. Yes, recovering perfectionist here. Yeah. Perfectionism doesn't always look like the textbook version either. Perfectionism for some might look like wanting everything to be perfectly tidy. So some kids might want their desk perfectly organized. So pencils go in a certain direction. They go in a color-coded rainbow. That's what perfectionism might look like to them. For others, perfectionism might look like procrastination. So not handing things in until the last minute because, and I spoke about this actually in the other talk that I did last year, with this link between perfectionism and procrastination. When we leave things to the last minute, it gives our mind an out if we don't do particularly well. So if we leave a school project, some kind of poster that we're making for school to the last minute, and then we do a bad job at it, or we do an average job at it, we don't take it on personally. We say, oh, well, I only did it the night before. Of course I was going to do badly. Yeah, but if we do things really ahead of time and then we get an average mark, it's much easier to internalize that disappointment. And so hence why a lot of perfectionists actually procrastinate and leave things really to the last minute. Another one is the need for lots of reassurance. In adults, this might look like if somebody, you make a meal for somebody and they come over and have it for dinner, and then the person is almost chomping at the bit to get the other person to say, what did you think? Oh, and how are the potatoes? Oh, what did you think of the rice? You know, it's this internal pull and tug and yearning to get reassurance that what they've done is good. In kids, this is, here's my assignment, or here's my project, and they need lots of reassurance constantly, what their outfit looks like, that sort of thing. And then another one is that constant need to achieve. Remembering that not every anxious kid is going to have all of these. And as with anything, we kind of pick and choose what our personality chooses. So for me, as an anxious kid, that was definitely one of mine. As an anxious adult, I'm still working on it. I'm still figuring that one out, to be honest. It's that internal yearning to strive and make an impact in some way. It could be, your child comes second in their athletics race, and it feels good for about 5 minutes, and then the next moment they kind of want to go again because they want to get more than silver. They want to get gold. You know, we see this one a lot in the Olympics, in those post-match interviews, the disappointment that can seep through if they don't get number one. And I mean, a lifetime of sports will do that to you. Okay, so if we look at the emotions, I don't think any of these are going to come as a surprise. Kids get really cranky if they're anxious a lot of the time. Irritable, snappy, snarky. They respond really quickly if things don't go according to plan in some way. They can be panicky, they might not be. That feeling, that sense of being very on edge, you know, you're just not quite sure how it's going to go. They could feel great and the day's okay, or something might just set them off and then the rest of the day is impacted negatively in some way. And a general sense of nervousness is a really common one as well. Okay, so as I said, this is not every single symptom, but it's a good indicator, remembering that the main undercurrent of anxiety in kids or in adults is that excessive worry, and generally it's feeling out of control in some way. So when we talk about the COVID stuff, we'll talk about that sense of feeling out of control again. Cool. Okay, so some of the major factors that trigger anxiety in kids, let's have a little bit of a look at those. Stressful life circumstances. So that could be a bit of family discomfort in some way. If there is family trauma in any way, that will impact often. If there is arguing in the family, in the household, if there is a move, if there is something particularly exciting that has happened, all of these act as a stressor, even if they're a positive thing in that kid's life. So stressful life circumstances can trigger off generally the worry that was already there. So it just ramps it up in some way. Brain chemistry is another big one. So the talk in mental health circles for quite a long time is that when it comes to anxiety and depression, there's something misfiring in the brain in some way. There's serotonin a bit off, or dopamine a little bit off, or something like that. That's not the full picture, but it is a large part of the picture. So we need to consider that might be part of your child's picture, or your niece or nephew, grandchild, whoever you're thinking about today. Gut function is a really big one, and this is gaining more airtime in recent years, which is really important. So when the gut is a little bit off, that can impact our mental health as well. We'll chat about that in a little bit more as well, because I think that's not as commonly spoken about. Genetics. So if somebody in your family is a bit anxious, or might have depression, or there is other mental health challenges somewhere in the family, that can impact that child as well. And the general environment that child is in. So, for example, with most people, I should say, homeschooling at the moment, that's going to impact it, of course. It might impact some kids for the better, but it's also a stressor. So if there is an undercurrent of worry already sitting there, it might lift it up, shift it out, and bring it to the surface. Cool. Okay, so remembering, any questions, pop them in the chat box and I can go through those at the end as well. All right, so let's have a look at 6 ways to help with anxiety. There are, in the book, so in the Panic Button book for kids, there are, I should count this, but I would say maybe 50, 60 different things that you can do with your kids, depending upon the flavour of their worry that day. So we're going to go through 6 of them now. Okay, so one of the things that we can do is to increase vagal tone. So as I just referred to then, the gut function directly impacts our mental health. So there is a cranial nerve that goes all the way from the brain down pretty much where the spinal cord is, down into the belly. This is the largest cranial nerve, and it's referred to as the vagus nerve. And this nerve sends information up and down. So I'll start this way. So if we're feeling worried in some way, we're worried, we're stressed, we're nervous, we're overthinking, whatever it is, that information travels directly down the vagus nerve into the belly, and then it basically stirs up the belly in some way. So if you think, if you've ever made a speech at a wedding, or you can hear my baby in the background. Hello, Ruby. If you've ever made a speech at a wedding and you've been a bit nervous about it, you probably had a bit of a bubbly tummy in some way. And so when it comes to that mental health continuum, the bubbly stomach can ramp up. So it becomes more than a bubbly stomach. It becomes irritable bowel, or it's consistent discomfort in that area. Information goes the other way, as I mentioned. So when our stomach is off in some way, so there might be some kind of inflammation there, that information also goes all the way up the vagus nerve and plonks itself in the brain, and then can kick off the mental health symptoms as well. So that's where anxiety and depression in particular can be impacted if that stomach is not doing particularly well. So we want to really take care of our little people's guts. If they're constantly having uncomfortable bellies, you know, they might be bloated, they might be gassy all the time, I'd be looking into that. That aside, how can we improve that vagal tone? So how can we improve that functioning of the vagus nerve? So stomach aside, now increasing vagal tone is actually pretty easy to do. We can gargle water, gargle anything really, or we can sing is another way. When we gargle or when we sing, that activates the vagus nerve. And then when the vagus nerve is activated or stimulated, it then stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the rest and digest response. That's there's no tiger chasing me. I'm safe. It's okay. So gargling and singing, easy peasy with kids. You can make it fun, you know, both put water in your mouth and try to do your ABCs together, sing a song at the same time. If you're in the car, put music on, they know the words too. That can help. It's a minor thing, but it can definitely help. So something to consider. It's made me thirsty. Okay. So another way to help kids with worry is to actually help them consciously worry. It's very tempting to tell kids, don't worry about it, everything's fine. We don't want to do that. We want to give them space to feel their feelings and know that what they've got to say or what they are thinking and feeling is valid and important, and we want to give them space to do that. What we don't want to do is let that worry bleed into the whole day. So to consciously worry, you choose a time limit. So 5 minutes is generally a good one for kids. You say, okay, the time currently is 12 p.m, let's say. Okay, you've got till 12:05 and I want you to worry as hard as you can worry. Tell me everything that's on your mind. Say it all out loud. You're going to worry hard. And then when it goes to 12:05, I'm going to take a big deep breath in together, and we're going to move on to the next activity. They might feel comfortable to say it out loud to you. If they do, great. Getting it out through their throat and out through their mouth can be helpful. If that's not going to work for some reason, they can, or they're older, they're sort of into tween, moving into teen areas, give them a piece of paper and a pen and say, cool, all right, I'm going to come back in 10 minutes. I want all of your worries out, and then you can burn the piece of paper. You just want to get it all out in one go. Tinier kids might whisper it into their toy's ear, for example. And then afterwards, you want to have something else to divert them away to. So after that, we're going to have lunch. Yeah, can be as simple as that. Cool. Okay, another big one is to release other people's feelings. This is not your typical anxiety-based symptom, but it's so common. With a lot of the kids and students I used to teach, it was really common. If they had, those big, sensitive, smushy, wonderful hearts, they'd really feel into the emotional flavor of what is going on around them. And, if their brother or sister was having a rough time, they were having a rough time. Or if dad was having a tough time at work, they were feeling downcast as well. And so helping kids to release any of the emotions that actually aren't theirs out is really helpful. You don't really see this in your psychology textbooks, but it's so helpful. Great for adults as well, if any of you are empaths, which I'm sure some of you are. It's a good one. And you can use little script. There is a little baby script in the book as well, but here's one that you can just use straight away. And you'd get your child to repeat this out loud after you. So once you go, oh gosh, I think that's actually their friend's feelings. That doesn't sound like the words of my child. You'd get them to repeat out loud something like this. So even though, and then they'd say, even though I care a lot about others, it's not my job to feel other people's feelings. I now choose to breathe out all feelings that aren't mine. And you get them to breathe it out. Big one. Also, being able to recognize that it's not their feelings and it's not their emotions. Big deal. Really important. And then actively being able to breathe it out is a good one too. Cool. Play. Super simple. Play is the greatest antidote to stress that we pretty much know for adults and kids. So as best as you can, play, be fun, lighthearted, be outside, soccer balls, board games, make-believe, dance, all of these things. Whatever your kid likes to do, give them the time to actually play. I'm sure you're probably already doing this already, but it's nice to be reinforced that some of the things you're doing are already spot on. The next one is to oxygenate their brain. Deep breathing. And when it comes to anxiety, this is probably the most common technique that is spoken about is to, take 3 deep breaths. And even though we talk about it a lot, it's really helpful. The more oxygen that we can bring into the brain when we're in a state of stress, or anxiety, or worry, it sends a message to the body that there is no threat. There is no immediate danger that needs to be dealt with. There are oodles of breathing techniques. There's lots in the book. But one of my favorites, great with kids, is to lie down on the ground. You can do it next to them, and then get a reasonably heavy book. That's probably about a good weight, this type of book, and you pop it on their stomach, and then you tell them to breathe the book up and down. So as they breathe in, the book goes up, and as they breathe out, the book goes down, because essentially they're taking very deep breaths to blow up their belly and then exhale it all out. And when there is a physical cue to show them how effective their breathing is, it can often help. There's lots of other techniques you can do, but that's one of my favorites. Next one, a bit Taylor Swifty, is to shake it out. This is a technique that is inspired by something called sort of a dance modality called Koya. And they talk about, if there is a gazelle in the Serengeti and they have a near miss, a lion comes and tries to get them and they miss and they bolt for their life, and then they're sort of panting away. That gazelle doesn't turn to the gazelle next to it and say, "Oh, you'll never believe what has happened. I need to debrief. I need to tell you everything." They don't have the capacity. So they physically shake out their bodies. If your family is into nature documentaries, you've probably seen this. The animals literally shake their whole bodies and it resets their system, and then they can kind of get back to grazing or doing whatever they're going to do. Works for us too. We're animals too. So with kids, do it one body part at a time and make it a bit fun. So, shake your right leg out, left leg, right arm, left arm, belly, shoulders, nose, shake it all out. And the mood shift that comes from it is pretty huge. I think it's amazing. All right. Cool. So those are 6 of our techniques. There's lots more, but they might add a few extra into your toolkit of what you're already doing. And so we're going to have a look now at, because I anticipated that this might be a question that comes up. So I've sort of jumped the gun a little bit of helping kids through COVID. And some of the things to take into consideration and remind you that you're doing a great job, or give you another couple of pointers. So the first one, super easy. Check in with your kids. Ask how they're feeling. Ask them what they think about COVID. Ask them what they know about the pandemic. If you had a feeling when you think about COVID, what would it be? You might say, well, I feel pretty nervous. How are you feeling? And you might be surprised. They might not be nervous at all. they might be feeling great. They get to spend more time at home. If they're a bit more introverted, they might like it even more, or not. And if it's not, you want to delve in and continue to ask lots of questions to get to the bottom of actually what their experience is like. And then if you can debunk any fears with some actual facts, what fears you're debunking as well. So create really strong, healthy, open conversations where everything's okay. It doesn't matter what they ask, it's all good to ask. Find things that can be controlled. So knowing that anxiety, one of the hardest parts is feeling out of control of our circumstances in some way. Hello, COVID. We can't control much about it at all. So help your kids find things that they can control. So depending on their age, it's going to be different, but they could be in control of reminding everybody in the family to wash their hands. They could choose the color of their mask, depending on their age and if they have to wear a mask. Those kind of things. Similar, somebody asked me the other day about their child was worried about climate change, and the same thing. Look for something that child can control. They can control, as soon as they walk out of their bedroom, they can turn their light off, and that's going to save some energy and electricity, things like that. Another one is to actively look for the helpers in the situation. So together with your kids, look out for people who are helping. So you might look out for the supermarket workers or the delivery drivers or the scientists or the nurses or the doctors, and have a conversation around how they're helping. You know, what's their job like? What do you think their experience is like? That sort of thing. Sort of a bit of a reframe. Seek out positive input. So there's lots of negative news at the moment. So that could be anything from creating a scrapbook of happy news and good news in the world, and, you know, getting out the glue sticks and popping it all in. It could be asking around each time they FaceTime or they meet up with family, getting them to go and ask, you know, what's the happiest piece of news for this year from you, and actually getting them to positively seek out the good stuff, so it balances it out a little bit. Practice relaxation together. So all of those good things that we know are good for us: walking outside, being in the sunshine, meditation, all of those sort of things. Actively practice it together. So it's not a thing that they have to do or a thing that only you do. It's a thing that we do. We meditate. We go outside. We take our shoes off when we walk in the sand. We sit on the grass when we go to the park, you know, all those sort of things. And the last one is to prompt them to feel their feelings, so they don't feel like they have to squash them down. You know, if they're feeling sad, let them be sad. We don't want that to leak into the whole day, week, month, that sort of thing. But it's got to be okay to feel sad or disappointed or grieving that they don't get to do their Year 6 farewell, or, you know, all those sorts of things. Okay, so hopefully those are some extra tips that will help. So what now? I wanted to show you a little bit of the inside of the book. Oh, there it is. Hello. And then you've got my details. So I'm going to stop sharing. You can just see me. Beautiful. Okay. So I wanted to show you a little bit of inside of the book so you know what to expect inside. So at the beginning, it asks your child what emotion they're currently feeling. So some kids will be able to read it. Younger ones will just recognize the face. How intense that feeling is for them right now. The reason this is in there is so you know that whatever techniques you go through as you're reading the book, you know what works, because you check in again at the end. So ideally what you'd like to see is that number go down by the end of the book. But if not, it's also very helpful information, because you go, oh, that didn't work. Do something different tomorrow. And then it's the rest of the book is split up into questions on one side and then a technique on the other. So here's an example. Does it feel like there are too many thoughts or ideas in your head? For anybody who's a bit headsy or a bit anxious themselves, they'll probably recognize this experience. Yes. Stand up, bend over like you're going to touch your toes, hold on to each elbow and dangle forward like a rag doll. Picture all of the unhelpful thoughts falling out of the top of your head, and after about 20 seconds, gently stand back up. Cool. So if they're still feeling a bit nervous, anxious, then you just keep going, essentially. And so, and then you're going to check in again at the end of the book. How they're currently feeling, the intensity of it. And then there's some extra tips in the back. There's some affirmations. There's an anytime meditation script, all of that sort of thing. So hopefully that will help your kids. So that's everything that I want to go through so far. So I might find where Abby is in there and we'll go through some Q&A if any have come up.
I'm coming back. I'm here. Thank you, Tammi. That was so awesome. Gosh, you covered a lot, and there was just so much wisdom and so many, fantastic actionable tips in there. I know I'm really looking forward to getting the book as well. I've got my copy on pre-order, and that was the first actual look at it, and it looks really cute. So well done. It looks absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so look, thank you so much. We've got a few questions from the community that I'd like to jump in and ask you now. And then for the audience, if you guys have any questions, don't be shy, pop them in the chat box, and I'll put them to Tammi. But to start off with, let's jump into some from the drop-in women's health community. The first one that we had was, what advice do you have for helping preteens and teenage girls to better handle anxiety? So I guess looking at that particular age group and gender.
Yeah, as I mentioned, symptoms of anxiety are very similar from kids, teenagers to adults. So a lot of those techniques will help with teenagers as well. However, being a girl is hard. it can be so tough. Some of the common things that come up for particularly teenagers is rumination is one of them. That's where you constantly go over the same thing that has happened in the past over and over and over again, and it just kind of eats you up, you know. So being aware that rumination might be something happening for your teenage girl, teenage boy, the same, or for you, you know, we've all experienced that. And then mindfulness is a really good thing to do for rumination. So when we think about mindfulness, if we think about it as a what's this sign called? I've totally blanked. Looks like this.
Infinity.
Infinity. Oh, thanks. Susanna's jumped in too.
Thanks, guys.
So if you think about it on this side over here as the past, where it crosses over in the middle as the present, and this part over here is the future. When we look at mindfulness, we want to consistently be moving like this. So we don't want to get stuck in the past. That correlates with non-clinical depression. Getting stuck in future correlates with non-clinical anxiety. And so we constantly want to cycle through. We don't want to get stuck in the middle either. So Google a bunch of mindfulness techniques. You know, teenage girls, it's a bit more in vogue than it was when I was a teenager. But things like, you know, what are the five senses? What can you see, hear, feel, smell, taste? You know, that's a great technique for all ages, but particularly for that rumination-based mindset. Catastrophizing is another really common one in teenagers where...
Yes. Speaking from my own memories, my own catastrophizing, yeah.
Yeah, right. You know, something's bad. It's not bad. It's the end of the world.
The end of the world. But it feels that way. It feels that way, right?
Yeah, big time. So checking in if that's something that is happening for your teenager, and there's a bunch of techniques related to those as well. But I think if you pop in rumination and catastrophizing, that's probably a good place to start your extra research into helping teenagers as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Another question from our community. It's the first year of primary school next year. Do you have any tips to make that transition smooth?
Oh, as somebody with a baby, my heart.
Yeah. And I think they mean for the child.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, it could be for the parent too.
I think from both ends, but
yeah.
For the child, with anything that's new and potentially uncomfortable, practicing and role playing is really great to do. So with your Littlie, you can, certainly in the weeks and ideally the months leading up, chat about what do you think the first day of school is going to be like. You know, what do we know is going to happen? What don't we know is going to happen? And then do the role play of the send off. So when you actually go to the school gate, or in a lot of cases now, it's into the actual room, do a bit of a role play of what that looks like. You can make up a little cute handshake and you can practice it. And then when it comes on the day, you've had lots of practice of visualizing, the kids visualizing what they're wearing, the color of their school uniform, the handshake. You've had a go at it. It might be just a kiss on the cheek, whatever it is. And then there is something that is familiar in that very unfamiliar moment.
That's a wonderful, wonderful tip. And Ali in our community has said, role play brilliant. Thanks, Tammy. Another question from the community, and then I'll jump to those in the chat box. I can see there's a couple in there now. The question, this is my heart on this question, but someone in our community asked, how do I help my daughter to navigate the struggle of fitting her beautiful self into the small boxes our society creates for us? Her emotional depth goes beyond what children her age can relate to and what adults typically expect.
Oof. Yeah. Oof. My first question is, do we need to fit her into the boxes that society gives us? In a lot of cases, probably not. It is uncomfortable to go outside of the societal norms, and I get that, and it's uncomfortable for the whole family often, not just for that teenager. We want to be leaning into all of the things related to being a big, sensitive, heart-centered, empathic soul. She sounds amazing, by the way. The technique that I shared just before of releasing other people's feelings is a really good one. You can also do that with situations. So you can adjust that sentence that I popped up on the screen before to helping her, let's say she doesn't want to wear things that all of her peers and other kids her age are wearing. That's okay. She still might wear them as long as you're okay with it. And then at the end of the day, if it's gotten her down, you can use those it's referred to as a release. Like, even though I didn't wear what everybody else wore today, I'm going to release all of the frustration and the disappointment and the embarrassment, or whatever it is, whatever the emotions are for her, out, breathing in, breathing out, and being rock solid as best as you can for her is important. So grounding energy is really important. So shoes off, walking on bare earth for you as the parent is important, because the more that you are grounded, the more stable, the softer place to land you are for her.
It's that be their calm in the storm.
Yeah.
Which I really like as well. I mean, I know that, I've often found myself getting quite caught up or triggered by my kids' emotions, and I've learned to take myself outside, do some deep breaths so I can come back in and be that presence, I guess. But it's taken me quite a bit of work to kind of get to that point where I've identified and realized that I need to do that as well. We've had two questions that are quite similar, so I might consolidate them, from Susanna and Pamela, asking, how can you get a child to share their feelings when they don't want to, or refuse to, or they don't want to talk to you or even a counsellor?
Oh, tricky. I mean, it's much easier when kids automatically say, okay, I'll give it a go. But that's not the case always. One thing that is possibly an unpopular thing to consider is think about your own experience and relationship with emotions as well. How open are you in sharing vulnerabilities? And how open are the people around your kids, so it might not be you at all, in sharing vulnerability and talking about feelings and opening up and doing all of that sort of thing? If that's a non-event, that's nothing for you. Again, you've got to be that rock solid person where you just keep showing up and keep offering it. So they might say, no, I don't want to go to a counsellor. Is there a counsellor that you would want to go through? Is there a person that you would want to go to? And try and squish it around those kind of ways. And if all of that doesn't work, sometimes you can say, you know what? All you have to do is sit in the room. Sit in the room. I'll have your phone out here.
Yeah. Just get them there, right? Just get them there.
See how you go. Yeah.
Thanks, Tammi. Another question, gosh, I relate to this one with my son. Wendy asks, fear of dentists or doctors, you know, the unknown for a 10-year-old. I feel like I could have written that myself, Wendy. Yeah.
And what to do about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that there's lots of things that you can do, but one thing that can be helpful is to use something referred to as an acknowledgement statement. And this is where you acknowledge the thing that's hanging in the air, so the situation, what the feelings are, and what you're going to do next. So it looks like this. It says, what I would like to say is, and you'd prompt your 10-year-old to do this, by the way. What I would like to say is, I've got to go to the dentist for my annual checkup. The emotions associated with this are fear, nervousness, curiosity, worry, but I'm willing to put it to the side so I can focus on, when I get there, sitting really still. So it's really recognizing that fear, giving it the space to be there. I mean, dentists are a bit scary, aren't they? So yeah, that's what's happening. These are the emotions that you're feeling. What can you focus on that's going to help it make it a little bit better for you? So doing those 3 steps can be helpful. Another one, a little bit left of field, is when you can get adults as well. You can tap on this part of your hand. So this is referred to as the karate chop point. And tapping on this point here, if you tap on that point there, so if you think about Chinese meridians, if you tap on that point there for a minute and a half or more, it starts to balance out cortisol levels, which greatly impact fear. So you can do your acknowledgement statement. You can get your 10-year-old to tap here on the car on the way to the dentist, and both of those things might make a bit of a difference.
That's wonderful. Thank you. My son really likes karate, so I feel like we could kind of incorporate that into something, you know, in a bit of a sneaky way if he's feeling a bit resistant as well.
Oh yeah, so EFT. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, that's pretty much all we have time for. Gosh, that went so quickly. And there were so many great questions. So thank you, everyone. But thank you so much, Tammi. It was just amazing to have you again in the drop-in and you know, look at this new book that you've put together, and I know I'm really, really excited